Hi, everybody. We just waiting for Shanti to connect. She didn't have power, and she did have power. Then she suddenly didn't have power, so she's just had to connect the generator. So I'm sorry about that. I'm just sending the link to her other email address. So carry on drinking your tea and checking your emails, and hopefully we'll start in a few minutes. Sorry about the delay. And also thank you for being very accommodating with starting a bit later. It's nice to see you all. I can't see anybody except myself and Dave's picture. So if you want to chat about anything, you can. Otherwise, we can just be quiet. Hello, Hayley. Thank you for letting me see your beautiful face. And Dave, not your beautiful face, your handsome face.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Dave.
Recognize a few faces on the call this afternoon.
Oh, nice to see some familiar faces.
Claire, are you going to let us know when the meeting starts? It's Onika.
Hi, Onika. It's going to start in literally 2 minutes. She's just connecting. Perfect. She's just connecting. Sorry, Onika.
No problem.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for moving it out an hour, which we were doing to accommodate the load shedding, but then she wasn't. She didn't come back on.
So, when I appointment, I need to see your CV. I need to see it.
How's everything going, Dave? Mexico?
Online.
Oh, Shanti's here. Yay!
I'm here. I'm so sorry.
There she is.
Okay. I think you did that very well. 3 minutes to connect your generator.
No, the power came on as we got all the cables for the generator into the study.
Well, one thing we've learned in our lives is how to be flexible and adaptable and how to connect a generator. I did not know how to do. Now I know how to do that.
Oh my goodness.
Thanks, everybody. Take a breath, Shanti. If I was near you, I'd bring you a cup of tea, but you're quite far from me.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit far for that.
Okay.
Cool.
So officially, welcome. Thank you for again for joining the SAPICS Mentorship Programme. It's great to have you all on board. I have been keeping a spreadsheet of the connections that have been made. And thank you to those of you who have sent me that information. If there's anybody who hasn't and you're happy to share it with me, just so we can measure how it's going in terms of numbers, etc., I'd be very grateful. And today's session is really a guideline on mentoring. We are going to record it and we'll send it to everybody, to all of you who have attended and all of you who those who couldn't attend, as long as with some extra reading material. Dave has done some research and he sent me some material, which I hope he doesn't mind if I share with everyone. And I'm sure that some of you have maybe done your own investigations. And if there's something you'd like us to share with the rest of the mentors, there are 55 mentors on board, and we'd very much like to have at least 55 mentees. So just on that, I just want to, before I hand over to Shanti, and then I'll promise I'll be quiet. We've done 2 initiatives, one to the entire student and young professional people on our database, again with your profiles to get them to reach out to you. We will be raising it at the university roadshows that we're going to be doing early next year. We're visiting the roadshows. And we're going to be handing out the mental profile document then as well, in a physical form as well as online. And we've created a community on the YM, the SAPICS Your Membership portal, as well as on the SAPICS Facebook page. So we are trying to spread the word. If you come across any other platforms or groups of young people working in supply chain management with whom I can connect and give the information, I would be very grateful for that. So I thank you again for your time, your commitment to SAPICS and to the youth, and over to Shanti.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm not sure I'm an expert in mentoring, but I have done training and mentoring and coaching in the past, in my past life. So I'm literally, it's not a lot we can say in an hour, but going to give you a short introduction, and hopefully it'll give you a taste of what you can think about, and also stimulate a little bit of conversation, because obviously we all learn from each other. I know Haley and Dave have done research on mentoring since it started, and I'm sure many of the others have on the call. But just in terms of what is mentoring, I'm curious to hear from you how you would define mentoring. So if you were to think about mentoring, how would you define it? What do you see as mentoring? If you can just let me know, that'd be great. Come off mute and give me an answer. I can't see hands unless Claire's watching them.
No hands.
No hands. No one wants to share their thoughts on what mentoring is. Oh dear. Okay. So mentorship is about influence, guidance, and/or direction. So it's about influencing young people, guiding them and providing direction. In an organizational setting, the mentor influences both the personal and professional growth of a mentee. So it's a little bit of personal, it's a little bit of professional, but it's both of those things. And if we look at what mentorship's about, the one that I really enjoyed is this picture, which I stole off the internet. But it talks to a lot of the stuff we do as mentors. Mentors have a role in motivating people and keeping them going, keeping them trying, because often they'll hit a wall, they'll hit an obstacle, and they kind of have to breathe deeply before they tackle it. Mentors are there to give advice from your personal experience, from what you have learned. You're bringing that experience into the room. Mentors are there to celebrate success. And I think that's an important one, because what happens when these people approach you for mentoring is they choose you because they look up to you. They see you as someone who's already succeeded. And when you recognize them for success, that really opens their eyes and their thinking to the fact that they're doing well. Mentors are often there for direction. So to give people guidance on what they're going to do next, what the best choices, what their options are. Sometimes a mentor is a coach, and that person might have specific challenges, and you might choose to coach them through that challenge because you know they've got the answers within them, but they just need help getting there. Mentorship is also support, and it's really exciting when you can do this and celebrate with your mentee on this. I've got a client recently that I do a lot of mentoring with, and I remember a few weeks ago, she came to me, she had to present to the president of the organization, and she's just a newly made manager, and she was so scared. So we sat, we brainstormed, we thought of ideas. She shared with me what she was going to do. So that was the support. Then she sent it to me. I had a look, I put some thoughts into it too, in terms of advice, and she took it off and made it her own to get to the goal of presenting to her president of the company. And the success was the next day when she shared with me how well it was received and how well she was recognized for preparing and for understanding the needs of what the business was asking for. And that's kind of where mentoring comes through. Mentoring is also about training. So sometimes it's about imparting skills. So with the same mentee, she's someone who's in a quality environment, and I will often share experiences around ISO 9000, systems and processes, audit preparation, because that's new to her. But what is important is it's not one size fits all. Each person that you talk to is going to have different needs, and you're going to have to pull on the resources you have within yourself in all these different aspects. So I'm going to ask you, because I see not many of you want to come off mic, if maybe in the chat, if you've got any thoughts on this slide that you want to share with the rest of us, if you can just type your thoughts into the chat, and we can see what others are thinking around mentorship and these thoughts. If you do want to come off mic and talk to the slide, please do. I'm more than welcome. This is a conversation, it's not a lecture.
Shanti, I'll go.
Yes.
For me, it's about empowering people.
And for you, what is empowerment about?
So if I look at everything that you've put on the mentoring screen, motivation, that's empowering them, giving them advice, success, sharing successes of your own, as well as celebrating their successes, giving them direction. As a mentor, we've been on a certain direction, so we can understand pathways, and according to what they need, the coaching, identifying those needs and coaching them through those needs, the support, the network that a mentor actually has to offer that support, and then obviously the goals that you work towards together in terms of empowering that individual. Training, yeah, which also goes with that.
That's an interesting comment there, Dave, saying the arrow should also go the other way, because we learn from our mentees as well, and that is so true, because every time we mentor, each person, each situation is slightly different. So thank you for that, Hattie. I think you did a great summary there of what's in the slide, and I see the one around success seems to be the one that most people are saying is something that they hadn't thought of. So I'm glad we inspired some new thinking there. But that's exactly it. It's a combination. And we have to pull on different parts of these things to get to where we want to be. And each situation is different. The next slide speaks a little bit to the differences between coaching, teaching, and mentoring. And it's a slide I've used in training before. And I think it's something that's quite important as a mentor. When you are coaching, if you're training and coaching in the traditional sense, you really are focused on asking questions. You keep asking questions, and the assumption is that the mentee has the coachee has the answers, they have the experience. It's just you helping them to facilitate that experience into an answer. The other extreme of the spectrum is teaching. And teaching is around making sure that you give them the answer. If you think of the old traditional school classroom, where you would explain the problem, explain the answer, and teach it to them. I've just been doing that with my daughter now. We're looking at the children's rights for her test tomorrow. But with a mentee, you're going to have to be agile, because you're going to have to jump between both. So going back to the client that I've been working with recently, she has very good experience in terms of people engagement, interpersonal skills. She really works well with her team, and she's got fantastic insights. So when it's people issues, I would work with her here in the coaching space. But sometimes there's issues in terms of technical know-how, systems knowledge, quality systems that she has never experienced before. And that's where we jump to the teach. And often it becomes a mixture of the two. So I'm curious to hear from you guys, in what situation would you coach versus teach? So how would you flex between solving the problem for the person versus really understanding and asking questions? You can either answer in the chat or just come off mic. No thoughts.
One of the interesting things here for me is that I think as a mentee, you may not always have the answers, actually, because you're not an expert in everything. Whereas a coach, you probably are the expert, and you've got the answers to give. But as a mentee, often you're guiding people in, and you're making them think. So you may not always have the answers, to give, actually.
And that's often a challenging thing, is if you don't have the answers, it's how you help them despite that. So thanks for that, Dave. And that's important. We don't need to know the answers to everything as mentors. Any other thoughts? Okay, I'm going to move on then to the next one. And the next one really is around some of the tips, and it's a bit more detail than the last two. But some of the things that we need to make sure we do up front. So the first thing is, the first time you're meeting with your mentee is to clarify expectations. Make sure it's clear what is the role of a mentor versus the role of a mentee. Making sure they understand that they have a job to do, that you are mentoring them for their personal growth and development, but it is their responsibility to do the work. And it's important that they understand that, because often I find people will come to you with the expectation that you're going to do it for them, that you're going to solve their problem, that you're going to make everything easy for them, and they just have to rock up. And it's not. As the mentor, you are there to guide them, to coach them, to show them the way, but they need to do the work. And that needs to be clarified up front. It's also important to get to know them as a person, because every person is different. Every person's circumstances are different. Their career dreams might not be the things that you expect them to have because they're different to yours. And it's important to remember that each person is different, because just because they studied engineering, for example, it doesn't mean to say they want to be an engineer and run a factory. It might mean that they're going to do something completely different in the end. Every person's different. You also need to be a role model and sharing your stories and lessons learned, not so much as bragging about stuff, but rather where there's a situation where you've been in a similar situation, you might share a story that will show them what you learned from that situation, what you learned and how you applied the lessons later on in life. So you want to be that role model that they can look up to. You also need to balance questions and answers. And it's really important here. Give them a chance to share their thoughts before you solve the problem for them. Because often when a mentee comes to you, they might come with a challenge that they've actually thought about. And they've asked their friends and their colleagues, and they've spoken to people about it. And all they're really doing is using you as a sounding board to frame their answer to the problem. So don't jump in and solve it for them. And I think this is one of the ones as humans we are very guilty of, because often we want to fix it and they come to us and they're like, such and such isn't working well with me and I'm struggling, and you want to jump in and fix it for them. That's not what your role is. Your role is just to be the sounding board where they explain to you the situation. They tell you what they've done. They tell you what they're thinking of doing, and you ask them provoking questions to get them to think about it even deeper. Feedback is an important part of mentoring as well, but make sure it's constructive and it's feedback that's going to help them learn and grow. And often a great way to do this is to talk about something that didn't work and use that to help them understand what they learned from that situation and what they would do differently if they were faced with the same situation again. So rather than using feedback as something in terms of, oof, but you didn't do this right, and if I was you, I would have done A, B, and C, have the conversation around, okay, so it didn't work as you expected. What could you have done differently? What could you have done in a different way? How would you handle it differently if you had to do it again, if you wanted a different outcome? Recognizing their achievements, growth, and progress, I've spoken to. And this is an interesting one, and it speaks to Dave's one about not always having the answers. Sometimes our job is just to connect them, to pass them the contact details and help connect them to someone who can help them. So for example, I met with a friend this weekend, and her daughter wants to study civil engineering, and she wants to specialize in hydraulics. Now, I have no clue what she's on about, but I know my sister has a PhD in that. So I can connect her to someone who knows what she wants to study, knows what she wants to learn, and can give her advice that's more meaningful than what I can. So these are just some of the examples or some of the tips. And I'm curious from all of you, if there's any tips that perhaps aren't here that you'd like to share with the other mentors that we could add to this list.
Shanti, I'd like to maybe include listening.
Expand on that.
Because we listen to answer, otherwise we can listen to, you know, the person can use you as a trampoline, like a child uses to bounce ideas off. They can get energy from you. They can, you know, but to really, really listen between the lines as well, not just to what they're saying, but in between.
So listening deeply, listening and hearing versus listening just to listen. Jacques?
Shanti, I also want to add something to that. So I have somebody which I talk to quite often at work, and I think he doesn't really have all the answers for me, but he normally helps me figure it out, you know. So he'll ask me some questions until I answer myself, you know. I think that is also, I think maybe it can be under the balance questions and answers, you know, we can add it in there. But that's definitely something that came up now when I saw your slide.
Okay, I like that. Asking questions until I answer it myself. And that's exactly right, because many times they have got the answer. Any other thoughts?
I think it's quite useful to, you've got to clarify expectations, but really define, you know, what's expected out of the relationship, and maybe even create a bit of a mission statement for what you're going to hope to achieve out of the, you know, I think it would just focus your efforts. And, you know, that also is part of that first initial listening phase, is to just help the person, you know, first listen to what they're trying, you know, what they're wanting out of the relationship, and then help them craft that into, you know, a real clear mission of what you want to achieve. You know, so that you can reflect and you can see whether the mentoring is actually working and delivering on what you both expect, I guess.
I like that. So setting an upfront goal or mission that clarifies what you're going to be achieving through the mentoring relationship. That way you don't drift and you don't just sort of wander. You have a purpose. Cool. Dries, you've made a few comments here. Always answer in the positive. So do it like this versus don't do it like that, and never lie. Do you want to add anything to that? No. Any other thoughts or comments? There's an awful lot of people on the call and only a few voices in the room. Just having a look. Quite a few of you on the call. Okay. Yes, Dries.
Hi. Yes. So what I'm trying to say in that comment that I made there is, often you get people who will tell you 20 ways not to do a thing, rather than giving you one way of how you should do it.
Okay,
and
so not focusing on what not to do.
And that's wrong. You should always focus on what to do and catch them doing something right.
Yeah.
The book, that book, what's it? The 1 Minute Manager.
The 1 Minute Manager, okay.
Yeah, Ken Blanchard. You have to find them doing stuff right. Yes, they're going to do stuff wrong, but if you keep on showing them on their negatives, you are doing something wrong.
100%. And they say you should actually, for every one thing you find wrong, there should be 5 positives you find and recognize them for, to make it a productive relationship. Interesting. Cool. Any other thoughts in the room?
Hi, Shanti.
Yes.
JC here, obviously. So just from my side, I think the biggest thing we also need to be aware of is not to be too nice. One of the biggest developments and coaches and a mentor in my life, you know, practically in the workplace, not everyone is going to be very nice to you. And it's not about, it's about being honest. And the constructive feedback, it doesn't mean, you know, if you're giving them an expectation of what it is, factually, you know, and setting that expectation up from the beginning, that you can have that transparent relationship and communication, it's critical. Because, you know, if I'm just going to go, how great you are, and, you know, give them that expectation, it's not realistic if actually what's happening in the workplace, you know, especially depending on your level. When you get to a board level, I can assure you, you know, you need to be prepared, equipped with the right skills. And that's kind of what we're going to be passing down to them by asking them those questions. So setting up that expectation and giving them constructive feedback, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm being nice to you. So I think sometimes you can, you know, you try to please someone and try to be very nice and indirectly not give them the true factual information that they require.
So I think that's very important, is honesty and transparency, and not being afraid to give the bad news as well. Because sometimes you do have to give that feedback. It's not necessarily positive feedback, but it helps them to grow.
Yes. And then I don't know if you know a book by Brené Brown. I'm sure you do. It's about vulnerability.
Yeah.
And, you know, being vulnerable, or not oversharing, but, you know, your mentee needs to also relate. And I think what we come across is very intimidating sometimes. You know, this is this big work professional, you know, you've got this lovely CV with all this experience. And if you looked at our the little coffee workshop that we had, actually a lot of people were nervous. Yeah, that was the gist that I got, and the feedback I've got from the general team is that people are actually quite nervous with that forum to approach, you know, someone such as yourself. Even in this call, you can see people are quite nervous. So it's to just be a bit vulnerable to your mentees and show you that you are a real person. You also have challenges. It wasn't easy. Yeah, that's just my general 2 cents.
Yeah, and that Rumble with Vulnerability from Brené Brown is a fantastic one. So anyone on the call who hasn't read it, the book is Dare to Lead, I think. Fantastic book. I'm actually reading it at the moment. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, some positive feedback there and agreements with your statements, JC. Excellent. I think one of the things we also need to be careful of when we talk about mentoring is, what is mentoring not? And that is what I've got in the next slide, because it's quite important, because there's an expectation that's set up, and sometimes it's a false expectation. In fact, I met with Dave last week, and one of the things that a lot of the people have spoken to him about is finding them a job. But that's not what mentoring is. Mentoring is not doing their work for them. It's not intervening on their behalf or taking up their issues. It's not making decisions for them. And it's definitely not being on call 24/7. And it's not about imposing your agenda or your wishes and goals on that person. It's about the mentee and doing what's right for the mentee. And I think it's really important that that is also clarified up front with your mentee, because if you think about it, you are investing a huge amount of time in this individual, but they're also investing a huge amount of faith, and they have expectations. And I think this comes back to the comment Dave made around a mission statement or a goal. It's really important that in that relationship, they have a clear understanding of what it is you're working towards, how are you going to help them, and sometimes it's also helpful to share stories of how perhaps you've been mentored and what benefits you got from being mentored, similar to what JC spoke to us about earlier. Because if I reflect back on my career, I think over time, I've probably had 10, 12 mentors over time for different times in my career for different things. And as you grow, your needs change and your expectations change, and you're going to have different mentees or mentors for different things. So it's really, really important that we understand what it's all about and what is expected of each party in this relationship. Any other thoughts on that?
Good day, ma'am.
Yes,
Good
Theo.
day, everyone. Sure. Yes, another thing, what they will do, the mentees will test your knowledge. They'll come with something that they've already know or they've read about already from their textbooks or whatever. And then they'll come to you as if it's a quiz, asking you questions so that you can answer. So one must be very careful and be firm on that interaction.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think a good way to turn is to reframe it and turn it back on them in terms of saying to them, okay, so if that's your question, why don't you first tell me what you know? Because you're there to guide them and not the other way around. I see a comment in the chat. Dave's laughing. Oh dear. Okay, any other questions, guys? This has gone very quickly because no one's talking much. Who's off mic there? Someone was off mic.
Thank you for now from me.
Okay, thanks here. All right. I haven't got too many more comments because that was what I wanted to share with you. I thought there would be more conversation. Perhaps I should have asked more questions. But if you think about mentorship and the relationship that we're going to be establishing with these individuals through SAPICS, I am curious to know what sort of insights you've had so far in the experience. What sort of challenges have you experienced so far in these relationships? Because perhaps we can talk through some specific examples that we can talk through. So what are some of the challenges you've experienced? What are some of the things that have happened as a result of this mentorship program so far?
One of the new guys has reached out to me, interestingly enough, is feeling very frustrated because he has studied and he's got all these different qualifications, but he doesn't feel his career has progressed very far. So it's quite an interesting one to explore. I haven't yet spent time with him, so we've only just been communicating over email. But you do realize that the expectations for career are, sometimes if I just get the paper, I'm done. But actually, that's only the starting point. So you realize actually how important mentoring is in this process, because it's at the end of the day, it's about one, building relationships, and two, delivering results, I guess, are the two things that come to mind. And both of those are, can be facilitated through mentoring.
Correct. And I think it's a huge part is relationships and results. But it's an interesting comment you raised there, Dave. And I mean, it's something I see a lot because I do a lot of consultation around CV writing. And there is an expectation that, okay, I've got my piece of paper, I've done my degree, and now I'm going to get promoted, or I'm going to get the next job, or I'm going to be moved up. And unfortunately, the reality is that's not always the case because there's a glass ceiling. There's only so many jobs available within an organization. If I think back to the days when we were at Unilever, there might have been 5 engineers and all 5 of them got an MBA, but there was only one position. So managing realistic expectations is going to be a key challenge as a mentor, definitely, and making sure that they understand what reality is versus what expectation is. Any thoughts on that from anyone else in the room?
Just from myself, I mean, that's where it comes back, giving that expectation and a reality. I think, I don't know if you know I think it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less you know, the more confident you are. And as you get to know, the more you realize you don't know. So, and there's actually I think it's, if you see the graph, Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know if anyone else on the, just look at it. It's a full graph and it shows you the more you don't know, the more you think you know. And then as you realize actually how little you know, the more, you take a step back and you start to listen, learn more, and try to learn more. And the confidence never goes quite back up. Anyway, but what I was actually trying to say is that, again, and I echo what the rest of the team are saying here, is that, you expect to get that, BCom management, and I must be a manager, and a lot of the time it is that expectation. And now we need to explain to them, by asking them the right questions. In reality, that's not what's going to happen. Even if I look back at myself, I was like, okay, yeah, I could be a manager. When I just fresh out of varsity, knew nothing about, really managing people maybe. And what I've learned over 10 years is significantly different to what I was then. So it's getting them to understand that.
And that's an important part of sharing your story, so that they understand what is real and what is not. Because, yeah, it's important for people to really understand what the opportunities are. Any other thoughts?
The other thing is that when you get heated up in an argument, or you talk about a story that you one came across, and then someone will say, "Oh, I wish my friend could have been here to hear what we are saying. Can I give my friend your number, or can I give my relative your number so that they can talk to you about this?" So we might end up having so many mentees under you, or coaching a lot of people. So that's another challenge with the mentee.
And I think there is a responsibility to manage that expectation as well, Theo, because it is a risk in that we are doing this as well. This is something we're giving of our time for. So it's important to set those boundaries and to make sure it's clear that you're here mentoring as a SAPICS volunteer for the SAPICS members. And if their relative or whatnot is a SAPICS member, they're welcome to contact SAPICS to look and see who is available or join SAPICS for mentorship. So I think that's a very good point, because otherwise you will end up solving the whole family's problems as opposed to just the mentees. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Jacques?
Yes. So something that I saw within my organization, we've got some buyers there, and all obviously trying to climb the ladder. And we quite recently tried to expand on these buyers, interviewing a lot of people. And all of the people we interviewed, they had all of the qualifications, but nobody had proper communication skills. So in interviews, they were not confident at all, and because they're not confident, you literally have to drag the questions out of them, or the answers, and you start feeding them so that they can talk. And I think that is something that as a mentor you need to teach somebody or help them with, is presenting themselves, to be very confident. Because as soon as you're confident, everything just comes naturally.
No, that's an excellent point. And often the mentoring isn't so much about the technical qualifications as opposed to interpersonal skills and the skills required to actually ask the difficult questions in a boardroom, the skills required to have the tough conversations in the workplace. No, that's an excellent point. And yeah, as mentors, I think you're going to come across a range of challenges. And it might be interesting, Claire, in a few months from now to set up a session where we actually just talk through some of the challenges and how different people have handled them and what some of the results were, so we can learn from each other, because that might be a great way for learning. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I was just thinking back to our first session with the mentees coming onto the conference. And a lot of the mentees were all about IQ. And certainly EQ, to like was mentioned before by Jacques, is the confidence building, the emotional intelligence, because a lot of the young people, understanding their value systems, their belief systems, it all will align with whatever business they do, whatever company they work for might not align with their own values. So I think it's very important to understand who they are emotionally as well.
Yeah, no, that EQ skill. So it's quite interesting. What's coming through strongly here is that mentoring is not necessarily about the actual supply chain skills. It might be giving guidance in terms of career directions and stuff, but a large part is how do I engage as a human being in the supply chain world?
I think that's where the coaching skills comes in.
Definitely. Okay. Any other thoughts from the team? So there's been some really good conversations today around what is mentorship. And I think if I go back to that picture I showed in the beginning, I think it really did sum it up well. In fact, I'll put it back up again because it does. It sums up the picture beautifully in terms of what is mentorship. And we've spoken a little bit about what it is to be a mentor and also about what it is not. And I think those are two things that are quite important, what it is to be a mentor and what it is not. I think as each of you engage in this process, it's going to be different for each of you because the people who you're engaging with are different. But what is important, and Claire, I know you're on the call, is maybe we can set up a forum where we do chat to each other as mentors and get advice from each other on how to handle some of those tougher conversations where we get stuck, and almost support each other, and perhaps also to debrief some of the tougher conversations as a team or with another mentor, because sometimes it is, you kind of feel yourself going, okay, I'm jumping into that person, into my own, bringing my own world into that person's space, and perhaps I need to bounce my ideas off someone else to check I'm not going off track. So I think it's important that we keep talking and keep touching base. I also think it's quite important that as mentors, if there are any issues, any challenges you're experiencing with this process, that you make sure that we let Claire know what those challenges are so that we can address them, because it might be a case of having to educate the people being mentored. I know we've done it with coaching programs in the past, where we actually explain to people what to expect from a coach, what the relationship's about, so that when they start with the right expectations. And there may be value in doing that as well at some point if people are going off track. But please, I think, keep open lines of communication. Make sure that you are in touch with the team at SAPICS if you have any issues, so that we can address those things as and when we need to. I'm going to wrap up here, except for questions, if there are any questions, and then hand over to Claire. Are there any questions from anyone on the call? Well, we covered them all.
Another question. In terms of feedback from the mentors to SAPICS, how would that look?
That's a good question. Okay, do you have an answer?
Haley, I don't really have an answer because, I mean, as you know, this is all new and we're kind of all finding our way, and I appreciate any feedback. I have a few mentees who are emailing me as a few mentors are. So I'm sort of just keeping kind of, you know, sort of an eye on it and trying to sort of feel it. But I had thought, Jenny and I had thought that in 3 months' time post the conference, which would be end of January, we would send an email to the mentees and ask them how it's going and get some feedback from them, and not to ask them to sort of give personal sort of explanations, but just sort of in general how they found it, and if there's other ways that we could maybe help them within our scope. Because, you know, I think it's also important. I mean, a lot of people have said that they, you know, they're looking for work, and that's the key thing, and that's why they're looking for the connections. And we did have one mentee also looking for some counseling for himself, and so we kind of addressed that situation. So it's kind of just also finding our way, but we're definitely going to do a follow-up with the mentees like we will be doing with you, because we don't want to have all of this excitement and all this time and this commitment and for it to fall flat. So we must make sure that we are addressing what the needs are, and if the needs are we're looking for a job, then we're going to have to kind of change our way. But do you know what I'm saying? So that answers your question, Hayley.
So if I'm thinking back to what Shanti said earlier in terms of the vision, the mission, we also as SAPICS need to know what is exactly that we want to achieve out of this.
That's a good point, Hayley.
Yeah.
And back to back with the mentors and the mentees, so that we all land into the ultimate goal for why are we actually doing this? Why are we giving our time and why are we giving our experience? What is the ultimate goal here?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point, and I think that's something we can chat about and have a look at.
Yeah. I think we need to chat about that, absolutely, and sort of document it more than what we have. You know, what we've got documented is perhaps a bit airy fairy, and maybe we need to make it align it more to the SAPICS sort of goals and what the board of directors are thinking of.
Agreed. And I think, I've made some notes there because those are two very good suggestions, Hayley, because we're busy looking at the operating model at the moment, and coaching and mentoring is going to be a key part of that going forward. So thank you.
A recent survey that was done by SAPICS, we asked, what is the reason for wanting to be part of SAPICS and so on. It's my understanding that growing your network was one of the main things that came out of that. Was that and then also obviously your professional skills, but was that a key thing that came out?
Dave, that was a question that was asked, and networking and growing your personal network was a key thing. But the one that came out really strong was actually coaching and mentoring. So we haven't gone, we are still trying to get a few more responses before we look at the final results. But the mentoring and coaching arm has definitely come through, and career guidance as well.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just cool. So I mean, then that fits in quite nicely with that. But again, what are they hoping to get out of the mentoring? So there's another level deeper, which I think would be useful to get some input on. I don't know if we probably can't send out another survey, but we can collate that certainly from just our discussions with these potential mentees.
Definitely.
And then I'm just thinking, thinking back to conference, the first conference you go to, if you're not particularly connected, can be a very intimidating and overwhelming.
Daunting.
And perhaps you don't get much out of it unless you. So I think the mentoring bit could be quite powerful in when it gets to conference time. So maybe just something to think about.
It's actually
That's actually a really good point, because a conference on your own can be a very lonely place.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, I think, without sounding kind of like wishy-washy, what we're trying to do here is grow the next generation of supply chain. I don't like using the word professionals because I'm not a professional. So I always think that kind of stops people from wanting to become part of SAPICS because of the word professional. But that's my own view, and I don't have a lot of support in that, but that's fine. So brilliant supply chain people who are going to help this country grow and find their job, find their right seat on the bus, find their passion in this amazing space of keeping the country rocking and going. And please, can we just help a few people to get to that spot? That's kind of like how I sort of think of it in my head, but that isn't what I'm supposed to be writing on a brochure, so I'm going to have to work on that a bit more.
fantastic. Any other questions? I think JC came off mic for a moment and then went back on again.
That might have been the user problem.
Oh, okay, no problem. Any other questions in the room? So I think some really good feedback, and I like the suggestion of the feedback from the mentors and the mentees and how the process worked. I like the feedback and suggestion to clarify the purpose and vision for the mentorship program, and definitely to maybe use the mentoring relationships at the conference to build confidence for those who are starting. JC, yes.
Yes, actually, sorry. Just on where you suggested that we meet up collectively, because I think sometimes, like, I don't know if you already mentioned it, it could be you don't know the actual answer for something.
Yes.
And collectively as a group, and you know, it's also about us being vulnerable with each other and knowing, you know, I'm not very strong in this particular area, because you're not going to be perfect in everything.
Correct.
And it's bouncing the ideas off each other. I think it could be really beneficial.
Okay. No, we will
Yeah, I like that as well.
add that to the list. So Claire, I'm making nice notes here. You mustn't invite me to meetings anymore because I give you action.
I've been in lots of meetings with you, Shanti. I know how it works. No, I'm also making lots of notes. Loving the discussion. Thank you, everybody, really. And chatting to me if there are any sort of issues, and if I assist, obviously I'll take it further. But you know, let's make this work. Last time I think SAPICS started a mentorship program, it kind of fell flat, and there is also nothing more disheartening than putting your name out there and your giving of your time, and then nobody kind of reaches out to you. So it's also important for SAPICS to actually find the platforms where we can help people. And I also am encouraging you to also think about it as well, and to help me and Jenny and the other SAPICS people find that. We will be doing the recordings, and we will send it to you and to the people who weren't able to attend, but we've had half of our mentor list join. So, and considering some of them are in Australia and Singapore and China, I think we've done quite well.
Wow.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shanti. Thank you, Shanti. Thanks for being such an amazing SAPICS director and just giving of your time and buying generators specifically for this occasion. I mean, that's real commitment.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. And if there's any questions, just shout. I'll give the slides through to Claire as well to send out with the recording.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers, eh? Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.